What happens when even the 7-time world champion is left without answers? What exactly did Hamilton say on the radio when he was eliminated in Q1 of the Las Vegas GP? And how does this message reveal an alarming truth about Ferrari in 2025? Stick around, because what happened that night could be the rawest turning point of the season. Las Vegas was preparing for an unforgettable night of Formula One. Lights, spectacle, an urban track in the middle of the desert, and temperatures that dropped rapidly as the hours progressed. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could anticipate what was about to happen to one of the biggest names in the history of motorsports. Lewis Hamilton, the man who has won everything, who has dominated eras, who has made history time and time again, was eliminated in the first round of qualifying. An elimination in Q1. 20th on the grid. No penalties, no accidents, no mechanical problems. Just no performance. A fact that, by itself, defines the term catastrophe in the world of Formula One. From the first moment of the session, Hamilton showed difficulty finding rhythm. Onboard cameras showed him struggling to keep the car on the ideal line, and lap times were alarmingly low for a driver of his caliber. In the paddock, the surprise was total. How was it possible that the same man who weeks ago had shown promising pace was now being overtaken by cars from the back of the grid? It was not a pilot's problem. It was something deeper, more structural. When Hamilton received confirmation over the radio that his session had ended, his response was as cold as it was devastating. Couldn't get the tires to work. A short phrase, but loaded with meaning. He couldn't get the tires to work. There was no shouting, there was no drama. Just contained frustration. Because what that phrase represents is much more than a technical complaint. It is the reflection of a champion who is completely disconnected from his machine. A driver who, no matter how hard he tries, cannot get in sync with his car. That night, the trust between man and machine was broken. And at Ferrari they knew it. They felt it in the garage. That awkward silence that invades when no one has a convincing explanation. That moment when eyes meet without knowing if the error was a setup error, a strategy error, or simply a failure in the car's complete philosophy. That night, Ferrari didn't just miss an opportunity. Lost technical authority. Lost narrative. Because when your new star driver finishes last for no apparent reason, your entire speech falls apart. And the worst thing is that we are just starting the season. Hamilton's debacle in Las Vegas did not end with his elimination. The most alarming thing came in the previous seconds in the radio interaction with his team. A brief, tense, and above all, revealing conversation about a problem that goes far beyond simple miscommunication. Because when a Formula One team cannot offer clarity to its driver at the most critical moment in qualifying, the failure is not an individual's fault. It is systemic. It all started when Hamilton, still on the track and aware that his time was on the brink of elimination, logically asked, "Are we safe?" What he asked for was not just an answer. He was looking for a guide, a confirmation that would allow him to decide if he should abort his attempt or continue pushing. The context demanded it. In such changeable conditions and with a track drying out at times, any second counted. But the response he received was as ambiguous as it was frustrating. Keep pushing. A phrase that in racing slang can mean all or nothing. Hamilton, visibly disconnected from the track environment and depending 100% on the information of his engineer, thought he had seen the red light indicating the end of the session. He responded, "I got the light." In other words, he thought he no longer had time to start a valid lap. But Adami's voice appeared again, this time with more force. "No, push." The problem is that by that time, the pilot had already aborted his return. In that moment, those 3 seconds of indecision and contradiction sealed his elimination. What happened there was not simply a misunderstanding. It was a chain of errors in information management. The team had access to all the data, times on screen, traffic on the track, countdown timer. Not the pilot. Hamilton, from the cockpit, blindly trusts his wall, especially in moments where the pressure multiplies. But when that communication channel fails, there is no room for recovery. And it is not the first time this has happened at Ferrari. The Scuderia's recent history is plagued by poorly executed tactical decisions, contradictory messages and strategies that end up harming its own drivers. What should be a bond of absolute trust between driver and engineer often becomes a guessing game, where the one holding the wheel is left adrift. This confusion, experienced in one of the most sensitive moments of the weekend, is conclusive proof that Ferrari continues to suffer the same operational vices that have cost it championships in the past. Because it's not just about having a competitive car. It is about executing every detail with surgical precision. And in Las Vegas, they failed miserably at the very basis of all strategy: communication. When it seemed that nothing could get worse on Lewis Hamilton's night in Las Vegas, a small detail, almost insignificant at first glance, ended up sealing the disaster. We talk about a cone. A simple, poorly placed signaling cone that, at the most crucial moment in qualifying, completely interrupted the preparation for his final lap. And in Formula One, such a minor detail can have devastating consequences. The incident occurred when exiting turn 14, one of the most critical of the Las Vegas street circuit. On his penultimate fastest lap, just as he was about to launch his last serious attempt, Hamilton brushed a signaling cone displaced by another car moments before. The impact was slight, almost imperceptible from the external cameras, but from the onboard it was clear. A sharp and direct blow that destabilized his trajectory and forced him to readjust his line. That readjustment, under normal conditions, might seem minor. But in a session where the extreme wet tires were already outside their optimal temperature window, every second lost meant irreparable damage. The most serious thing was not just the contact. That was the moment it happened. Hamilton was in the middle of the preparation phase, that critical point where the driver must execute a perfect sequence to warm up his tires without degrading them. All the work on that outing lap is based on maintaining a millimeter progression, braking hard at certain points, precisely tracing the curves, applying specific lateral loads, all with the sole objective of bringing the rubber to the exact temperature to attack the stopwatch on the next lap. That cone ruined everything. The contact decompensated the maneuver, and the time necessary to get the car back on track directly affected the pressure and temperature of the tires just before crossing the finish line. And on asphalt as slippery as Las Vegas, that margin is sacred. If you don't make it to the first corner with the tread in its ideal condition, there is no way to salvage the lap. And the most frustrating thing for any pilot is this: when a mistake is not yours but it leaves you without weapons to fight. Hamilton knew he was in an extreme situation. He knew that attempt was all he had, and he lost it because of an item that shouldn't have been there. It was not a piloting error. It wasn't a bad setup. It was the chaos of a poorly prepared track, of race direction that allowed dangerous objects to be loose in critical areas, of a context that does not protect the driver when he most needs absolute concentration. This wasn't just bad luck. It was a structural failure in the management of the competitive environment. And for a team like Ferrari, which had already been walking a tightrope, this detail set off all the alarms. Because in Formula One, it is not enough to have a fast car. You also need an ecosystem that works like a Swiss watch. And on that night in Las Vegas, everything failed. An elimination in classification can have multiple explanations: piloting errors, strategic failures, external conditions. But in the case of Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari in Las Vegas, everything points to a deeper and more structural origin. The SF25 is not complying with the basic principles of a competitive Formula One car. And the clearest symptom of that problem lies in its dysfunctional relationship with tires. The Pirelli operating window for extreme rain is narrow, that is known by all the teams. But what differentiates the greats from the others is the ability to bring the tires to that exact temperature at the right time. Ferrari couldn't do it. The car simply did not generate enough thermal energy in the tires for them to offer grip. And that, in the humid Las Vegas night, was a death sentence. From the team itself, engineer Antonino Mazzola had already warned this before the weekend. The nighttime temperatures of the desert, added to a new, smooth asphalt with very little grip, were going to be the worst possible scenario for the SF25. In his own words, the exit lap has to be perfect, aggressive to generate heat, but gentle enough not to destroy the tire surface prematurely. That duality, attacking without braking, is a nightmare for any car with poor thermal management. And therein lies the core of the problem. SF25 does not have the ability to properly manage the balance between downforce and heat transfer. In other words, it doesn't produce enough vertical or lateral energy during the warm-up lap. That means that Hamilton, no matter how much he tried to brake later, line more aggressively or zigzag on the straights, was never going to reach the optimal temperature. The tire remained cold, unprotected, and that made it a death trap. Without temperature, there is no grip. Without grip, there is no control. But there is more. SF25 also exhibits another worrying pattern: its extreme sensitivity to external conditions. This car is not versatile. It doesn't fit. It requires a very specific trading window which, if not met, makes it an unpredictable platform. And this goes beyond Las Vegas. Already in the preseason tests, it was observed that the Ferrari had difficulties on low-grip circuits, and that pattern has been repeated. Hamilton did not fail as a driver. His talent remains intact. Its ability to adapt, read conditions, maximize the performance of any car under any circumstance. It's all there. But that night in Las Vegas, he faced something he can't fight, an unresponsive car. A system that does not accompany. A structure that, instead of raising his level, left him alone without tools. And the most shocking thing was not the final result, but the way it happened. The coldness of his radio message was not just frustration. It was a statement. A symbol of rupture. At Ferrari, they know it. That night left scars. Internal, deep, difficult to explain to the media, and even more complicated to heal within the box. Because trust in a project is built step by step, but it can be broken in seconds. And Las Vegas was that second. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.